Welcome to True Crime and Coke. I am your host, Eve, and this podcast is about true crime, disappearances, conspiracies, hauntings, and anything strange or unusual, all while drinking an excessive amount of Diet Coke. If you have a story to share, I would love to hear and feature it on a future episode. Just email me at truecrimeandcoke@gmail.com and put which category it is in the subject line. If you enjoy this podcast and want it to continue, please rate me 5 stars, tell your friends about me, and consider supporting me on Patreon under True Crime and Coke. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin. Hi, this is Eve. Welcome to episode 20. Today's episode is one that I will warn you about. You may not want to listen to it. It is going to get very graphic, and most true crime people can listen to everything, but of course, draw the line with children and animals. This is going to be an episode on the reality of bestiality. So I will get into all of that. I'm curious, just how it even works, and so I'll try to find that out and just tell you all about it, and then I'll tell you a story of a man who died from having sex with an animal. This will probably end up being a 2-parter. The first part, or at least mostly the beginning of it, will probably be kind of boring because it's going to be kind of like the statistics and history and exact definitions of it before we get into the really gross stuff that we all want to know. So let's get started. Zoophilia is a paraphilia involving a sexual fixation on non-human animals. Bestiality is cross-species sexual activity between humans and non-animals. The terms are often used interchangeably, but some researchers make a distinction between the attraction, zoophilia, and the actual act, bestiality. Although sex with animals is not outlawed in some countries, in most countries bestiality is illegal under animal abuse laws or laws dealing with buggery or crimes against nature. Buggery is anal intercourse, by the way. 3 terms commonly used in regards to the subject: zoophilia, bestiality, and zoosexuality are often used somewhat interchangeably. Some researchers distinguish between zoophilia, which was a persistent sexual interest in animals, and bestiality, which is sexual acts with animals. So they distinguish those because bestiality is often not driven by a sexual preference for animals. Some studies have found a preference for animals is rare among people who engage in sexual contact with animals. Furthermore, some zoophiles report they have never had sexual contact with an animal. People with zoophilia are known as zoophiles, though also sometimes as zoosexuals, or even very simply zoos. Zoosadism is for those who derive pleasure, sexual or otherwise, from inflicting pain on animals. Zoosadism specifically is one member of the MacDonald triad of precursors to sociopathic behavior. Zoosexuality is sometimes used by self-identified zoophiles in both support groups and on internet-based discussion forums to designate sexual orientation manifesting as romantic or emotional involvement with or sexual attraction to non-human animals. Some psychiatrists state that the 2 groups can be distinguished: bestialists who rape or abuse animals, and zoophiles who form an emotional and sexual attachment to animals. So let's talk about the extent of occurrence. There are the Kinsey reports that rated the percentage of people who had sexual interaction with animals at some point in their lives as 8% for men and 3.6% for women, and claimed it was 40 to 50% in people living near farms. But some later writers dispute the figures because the study lacked a random sample in that it included a disproportionate number of prisoners, causing sampling bias. bias. Martin Duberman has written that it is difficult to get a random sample in sexual research, and that even when Paul Gebhard, Kinsey's research successor, removed prison samples from the figures, he found the figures were not significantly changed. By 1974, the farm population in the USA had declined by 80% compared with 1940, which reduced the opportunity to live with animals. Hunt's 1974 study suggests that these demographic changes led to a significant change in reported occurrences of bestiality. The percentage of males who reported sexual interactions with animals in 1974 was 4.9% versus 1948 at 8.3%, and in females in 1974 was 1.9%, and in 1953 it was at 3.6%. Maletsky believes this is not due to a reduction in interest, but merely a reduction in opportunity. So that actually makes complete sense. Nancy Friday's 1973 book on female sexuality, My Secret Garden, comprised around 190 fantasies from different women. Of these, 23 involve zoophilic activity. In one study, psychiatric patients were found to have a statistically significant higher prevalence rate at 55% of reported bestiality, both actual sexual contacts at 45% and sexual fantasy at 30%, than the control groups of medical inpatients at 10% and psychiatric staff at 15%. Kripalt and Korcher in 1980 reported that 5.3% of the men they surveyed had fantasized about sexual activity with an animal during heterosexual intercourse. In a 2014 study, 3% of women and 2.2% of men reported fantasies about having sex with an animal. A 1982 study suggested that 7.5% of 186 university students had interacted sexually with an animal. Sexual arousal from watching animals mate is known as phaunophilia. A frequent interest in and sexual excitement at watching animals mate is cited as an indicator of latent zoophilia by Masson in 1994. Sexual fantasies about zoophilic acts can occur in people who do not have any wish to experience them in real life. Nancy Friday notes that zoophilia as a fantasy may provide an escape from cultural expectations, restrictions, and judgments in regard to sex. Masters in 1962 says that some brothel madams used to stage exhibitions of animals mating as they found it aroused potential clientele, and that this may have encouraged the clients to engage in bestiality. Several studies have found that women show stronger vaginal responses to films depicting bonobo copulation than to non-sexual stimuli. Bonobo is a type of chimpanzee, by the way. Zoophilia may also be covered to some degree by other fields such as ethics, philosophy, law, animal rights, and animal welfare. It may also be touched upon by sociology, which looks both at zoo sadism and examining patterns and issues related to sexual abuse, and at non-sexual zoophilia in examining the role of animals as emotional support and companionship in human lives, and may fall within the scope of psychiatry if it becomes necessary to consider its significance in a clinical context. The Journal of Forensic and Legal Medicine, Volume 18 from February 2011, states that sexual contact with animals is almost never clinically a significant problem by itself. It also states that there are several kinds of zoophiles. 1. Human-animal role players. Those would be what, the furries? 2. Romantic zoophiles. 3. Zoophilic fantasizers. 4. Tactile zoophiles. 5. Fetishistic zoophiles. 6. Sadistic bestials. 7. Opportunistic zoophiles. 8. Regular zoophiles. 9. Exclusive zoophiles. Additionally, zoophiles in Category 2, 3, and 8, which were the romantic, fantasizers, and regular zoophiles, are the most common, while zoophiles found in categories 6 and 7, which were the sadistic, bestials, and opportunistic zoophiles. Those were found to be the least common. Zoophilia may reflect childhood experimentation, sexual abuse, or lack of other avenues of sexual expression. Exclusive desire for animals rather than humans is considered a rare paraphilia, and sufferers often have other paraphilias with which they present. Zoophiles will not usually seek help for their condition and so do not come to the attention of psychiatrists for zoophilia itself. The first detailed studies of zoophilia date from prior to 1910. Peer-reviewed research into zoophilia started around 1960. However, a number of the most oft-quoted studies, such as Maletsky, were not published in peer-reviewed journals. There have been several significant modern books, from Masters in 1962 to Beats in 2002, and their research arrived at the following conclusions. Most zoophiles have, or have also had, long-term human relationships as well or at the same time as zoosexual ones, and that zoosexual partners are usually dogs and or horses. Zoophiles' emotions and care for animals can be real, relational, authentic, and within the animal's abilities, reciprocal, and not just a substitute or means of expression. Beats believes zoophilia is not an inclination which is chosen. Society in general, at present, is considerably misinformed about zoophilia, its stereotypes, and its meaning. The distinction between zoophilia and zoosadism is a critical one to these researches and is highlighted by each of these studies. Masters, Maletsky, and Weinberg each comment significantly on the social harm caused by misunderstandings regarding zoophilia. They say that this destroys the lives of many citizens. Beats also states that the phenomenon of sexual contact with animals is starting to lose its taboo. It is appearing more often in scholarly publications, and the public are being confronted with it too. Sexual contact with animals in the form of bestiality or zoophilia needs to be discussed more openly and investigated in more detail by scholars working in disciplines such as animal ethics, animal behavior, anthrozoology, psychology, mental health, sociology, and the law. More recently, research has engaged three further directions. The speculation that at least some animals seem to enjoy a zoophilic relationship, assuming sadism is not present, and can form an affectionate bond. Similar findings are also reported by Kinsey and other earlier in history. Maletsky notes that information on sex with animals on the internet is often very emphatic as to what the zoophile believes gives pleasure and how to identify what is perceived as consent beforehand. For instance, Jonathan Balcombe says animals do things for pleasure, but he himself says pet owners will be unimpressed by this statement, as this is not news to them. Beats described the phenomenon of zoophilia and bestiality as being somewhere between crime, paraphilia, and love, although she says that most research has been based on criminological reports, so the cases have frequently involved violence and psychiatric illness. She says only a few studies have taken data from volunteers in the community. As with all volunteer surveys, and sexual ones in particular, these studies have a potential for self-selection bias. Medical research suggests that some zoophiles only become aroused by a specific species, such as horses. Some zoophiles become aroused by multiple species, which may or may not include humans, and some zoophiles are not attracted to humans at all. Researchers who observed a monkey trying to mate with a deer in 2017, which would be called interspecies sex, said that it may provide clues into why humans also have interspecies sex. Instances of zoophilia behavior have been found throughout history. There's incidences in the Bible. They've found a cave painting from at least 8,000 BC. They have pottery that depicts it, but some people say that that doesn't mean that they were actually practicing it. It just could also mean that they imagined it, so that those aren't necessarily conclusive that they were doing that. Supposedly, Egyptians engaged in ritual congress with goats. Bestiality was accepted in some North American and Middle Eastern indigenous cultures, which I am pretty sure still happens quite frequently. Sexual intercourse between humans and non-human animals was not uncommon among certain Native American and indigenous peoples. Vogt describes the sexual lives of young Native Americans as rather inclusive, including bestiality. In addition, he says that some had no aversion to intercourse with live animals. Several cultures built temples or other structures with zoophilic carvings on the exterior, and that, again, these depictions may not mean that they engaged in it. In the Middle Ages, zoophilic activity was met with execution and typically burning, and death to the animals involved either the same way or by hanging. Some witches also were accused of having relations with the devil in the form of an animal, and as with all accusations and confessions extracted under torture in the witch trials in early modern Europe, their validity cannot be ascertained. I'm pretty darn sure that it's valid that that did not happen. As far as all the religion goes, I'll sum it up. People will say that, oh, this means it's okay, and then another person will say that that same thing means that it's not okay. You pretty much interpret it how you want to interpret it. I know this is a lot of boring stuff, and I promise we are almost through it, so just hang in there. So, legal status. In many jurisdictions, all forms of zoophilic acts are prohibited. Others outlaw only the mistreatment of animals without specific mention of sexual activity in the UK. Many new laws banning sex with animals have been made recently, such as in New Hampshire, Ohio, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Thailand, Costa Rica, Bolivia, and Guatemala. The number of jurisdictions around the world banning it has grown in the 2000s and 2010s. The only European countries where zoophilia remains legal are Finland, Hungary, and Romania. As of 2017, bestiality is illegal in 45 U.S. states. Most state bestiality laws were enacted between 1999 and 2017. So all of that stuff came from Wikipedia. I'm sure it is not 100% accurate, and if you want to read more about it, the legality of it, the percentages, the history, just go to Wikipedia and all that, but we'll start getting into the interesting stuff, or more or less disgusting stuff. I don't know what to call it because it grosses me out, but I am very intrigued on exactly how it works and functions and how they find each other and just all of that. So let's go. So I don't really have a format down on how I'm going about this. It'll probably be a mix of people's articles, opinions, more statistics, all of that. So the first one I will start with is a document written. It is called barksfromtheguild.com, and it is Zoophilia, a Hidden Horror for Animals. It's by Daniel Antilak, and it was posted on February 13th, 2018. I will read that to you real quick. I entered law enforcement at 20 years of age. When I retired 30 years later, I thought I had seen the full spectrum of human abuse, violation, and degradation. The cruelty of humankind no longer shocked me, though it wore me down. Through the years, I never investigated a single case of sexual abuse of an animal, and none of my fellow officers ever spoke of it. The crimes occurred under the radar, hiding in the long dark shadows of secrecy, pain, and trauma. On January 25th of 2018, I was exposed to a widespread dirty secret. As a new Humane Society of the United States volunteer, I was invited to testify before the Wisconsin Assembly Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety, and there I met Melissa Tedrow, the HSUS, or the Humane Society of the United States, Wisconsin director. Our goal was to amend Chapter 951, Crimes Against Animals. In 2 hours of testimony, I learned of a hidden network of animal sex offenders who communicate in online chat rooms. In later communication with bioethicist Jessica Pierce, she informed me that ASPCA reports at any given time 900 to 1,000 bestiality networks that are communicating, exchanging tips, and trading animals. They call themselves zoos, and one group has over 1 million members. What prompted the hearing was the infamous case of Wisconsin resident Sterling Rutschwall, whose behavior over 35 years was anything but sterling. He sexually assaulted horses. One horse had to be euthanized due to injuries. The investigator and district attorney who handled his last case described details of their investigation and the frustration of having inadequate laws to deal with such persistent criminal behavior. The investigator testified to video evidence in which Rutschwall snuck into a barn in Brown County and repeatedly thrust his arm into the rectum of a restrained draft horse. A second camera malfunctioned, but the breadth of the crime became evident as the farmer described behavioral changes he saw in his 3 working horses. The horses spooked when there was activity behind them, such as pulling equipment. When a 1,400-pound horse enters a flight-fight response, it is dangerous. The farmer had to sell his horses. A lady living on a farm in Brown County testified how she and her neighbors lived in constant fear for 35 years while Rotchwall was sometimes incarcerated and sometimes free in the community. They never knew whether their animals were safe, and so they slept in their barns at night with shotguns at the ready. Rotchwall was fined $105 and released on probation, according to the prosecutor. Today, he is free to repeat his established pattern of behavior without oversight. But this is not about a single offender. A veterinarian testified about the many animal clients she had seen over decades whom she suspected had been sexually abused. On April 15, 2015, Reuters reported on bestiality in Denmark and cited a 2011 Justice Ministry report that found 17% of veterinarians suspected a human had sex with an animal they treated. Denmark strengthened their animal abuse law as a result. Veterinarians may be the first line of defense in identifying this offense, yet there is an obstacle to early identification. In Wisconsin, a veterinarian has no duty to report to law enforcement. So how are police to investigate crimes they are never informed of? By contrast, a medical professional who treats an injured child and suspects abuse is required by law to report to police, who are then obliged to investigate. Veterinarians swear an oath to first do no harm, and yet may remain silent when they suspect sexual abuse of the animal client to whom they have sworn a duty. In my view, that makes them complicit and enables the offender. At 61 years of age, I remember the very moment I swore my oath of public office, and I uphold my commitment even upon risking my life for others. All I ask of veterinarians is to inform law enforcement so they may investigate the evidence they have witnessed. In my police training on domestic abuse, I learned many violent offenders first target family pets as a way of hurting human victims and demonstrating power and control. I see mandatory reporting by veterinarians as a crucial early warning sign, like the proverbial canary in the coal mine. If we don't see it coming, it will blow up in our face. Adult dogs are often described by animal scientists like Patricia McConnell as having similar emotions and cognitive development as human toddlers. Jack Panskep's pioneering research identified 7 emotional systems that dogs and humans share: seeking, rage, fear, play, lust, care, and panic and grief. Surely dogs and likely other mammals suffer terrible emotional abuse and trauma from human sexual attacks. The reader may wonder if this is an isolated crime not worth fussing about. An expert on animal sexual abuse, M. Jenny Edwards, offers data to consider. 56% of male sex offenders, 55% of female sex offenders, 38% of child sex offenders, and 11% of rapists report having sexually abused an animal. 29% of inmates arrested for pornography-related offenses collected animal porn as well as child porn. 25% of men who viewed adult pornography online also viewed animal porn. 6% of juvenile male offenders admitted to sexual contact with an animal. Statistics related to bestiality are artificially low, and the problem is growing. There were more than twice as many arrests in 2015 than in the entire period between 1970 through 2000. There is growing evidence that bestiality may be a lifelong sexual orientation and not just something that happens rarely. Studies have indicated that zoosexuals typically have their first experience around age 13, and the average age of arrest is 43. 35% of arrests for bestiality also involve child sexual abuse or exploitation. In addition, nearly 40% of sex offenders have prior criminal records for bestiality, child sexual abuse, domestic violence, battery, adult rape, substance abuse, trespass, public indecency, and even murder. To this, I add my education from an FBI psychological profiler who hunted serial killers for 20 years and told me many began by abusing animals. The FBI began tracking animal abuse in 2017 as a tool to identify serial killers. Just this week, a friend of mine considered adopting a dog from a rescue in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin that had been so violently assaulted. She required vaginal and rectal surgery. He ends saying that this crime is not an isolated offense in a single location and everyone needs to help shed light on this abuse and fight for it in their communities. The next article I am going to read is a published essay by Corey Silverberg, and it is "What is the difference between bestiality and zoophilia?" And I know I went over that a little bit before, but maybe he can sum it up in a way that's a little bit easier to understand. Not all aspects of sexuality are pleasant to talk about. When confronted with one of these more difficult topics, it can feel easier just to sweep it under the rug or to talk about it as quickly as possible and move on. Bestiality and zoophilia are two such topics, ones that most of us we'd rather not even think about, let alone have to talk about. But the problem with not talking about something is that it makes it much harder to figure out exactly what it is, why some of us do it, and how we might go about changing it. For years, researchers have been hampered in their request to understand those who sexually offend against children because the public, understandably, wants to think of them simply as monsters and doesn't want to waste their tax dollars researching the why of pedophilia. To some extent, the same is true of people who have sex with non-human animals. Definitions. Many people confuse the terms bestiality and zoophilia. They are related but different. Bestiality has always referred to the act of a human having sex with a non-human animal. The sexual activities may or may not involve penetration, but they are sexual behaviors done for gratification. Zoophilia was first used in clinical literature by the sexologist Richard von Krafft-Ebing, who used the term to describe a human being who is sexually aroused or inspired by an animal. Today, zoophilia is still used to describe the feelings of erotic or sexual attachment to and/or a sexual preference for non-human animals. The easiest way to distinguish bestiality and zoophilia is to say that bestiality is a practice. It's something people do. Zoophilia is a preference or experience, something people feel. Not everyone who engages in bestiality is a zoophile, and not all people who identify or would be classified as having zoophilia actually have sex with animals. Another important distinction to make is that only having erotic feelings or fantasies involving animals is not against the law, whereas in many places having sexual relations with non-human animals is illegal. From an ethical perspective, the question on if animals can consent lies at the heart of whether or not bestiality is wrong. The question isn't one that science can answer. It is clear that some animals are capable of consent like humans. Anyone who has lived with a dog or a cat as a pet will tell you that animals are also capable of demonstrating pleasure and resistance. From my perspective as a sex educator, the question isn't so much can the animal consent as can the human know for sure that there is consent. After all, whoever you are having sex with, if you clearly can't confirm consent, you shouldn't be having sex with that person. Since there is no way of knowing for sure what an animal is thinking or feeling, my position is that it is not possible to confirm consent, and therefore it is not ethical to have sex with non-human animals. An article by The Guardian says which animals are most at risk. They said it's not a reliable statistic, but it just has a few stories on it. Horses. I guess that's a popular one. In a 2009 study in the Archives of Sexual Behavior about zoophilia, a 47-year-old married father of two describes his sexual interest in horses. When I was first married, I tried so hard to be good, and I didn't have any sexual contact with equines for about a year. After that, I couldn't suppress it anymore, and my contact with the horses rose while my relations with my wife declined. I tried to be a normal husband, but human sex always felt wrong. I could do it, but I couldn't learn to like it. Even closing my eyes and pretending she was a horse didn't work after a while. This one snakes. A London doctor was found guilty of possessing footage of bestiality, including a video of a man having sex with a snake. How do you have sex with a snake? I mean, like, is it a female and they're inserting... I guess a snake can be inserted in holes. Dogs. A 64-year-old was charged by police after footage was found of her having sex with a Saint Bernard, a black Labrador, and an Alsatian. A British vet also pled guilty to criminal charges in 2014 after footage was discovered of him having sex with a dog and a horse. And that's scary because, you leave your pet sometimes at the vet. Cows, I guess, is another popular animal. In New York in 2014, a man was arrested for allegedly attempting to have sex with a cow while another man filmed it. And as I'm looking through here, there are so many cases. So it happens all the time. In 2008, in the state of Oklahoma, where I live, a couple was arrested in a massive bestiality case in Oklahoma City, and it may have been the largest bestiality case in history, but that was in 2008, and it was also really disgusting. The two people are accused of training their dogs to have sex with the female, who was aged 54, and other women. This woman was apparently busted by her own son, who found 150 tapes of her performing sex acts with the dogs, including a mixed breed and Labrador Lucky and Buddy and a blue heeler named Merland that was owned by the boyfriend of this woman. The boyfriend was the one who filmed the events. They were charged with crimes against nature, and they also tried to get their dogs back afterwards. It says that every person who's guilty of the detestable crime against nature committed with mankind or with a beast is punishable by imprisonment in the penitentiary not exceeding 10 years. So I don't know what sentence they got, if they even got any, but they would be out by now. And I guarantee you they didn't even get close to 10 years, if even a year. Here is someone who, I guess what they would describe as the bestiality sadist. This man burned, maimed, bitten, and sawed the tail off a dog, in addition to sodomizing it. And it also appeared that he bound the dog's legs with barbed wire. And he only served a little more than a month in prison. A Phoenix woman's toy poodle went missing one day, and when she stopped looking for it, the dog magically reappeared in her backyard, covered in blood and feces. The dog had been sexually assaulted, and the dog rapist was never caught. In 2006, two 6-week-old Shih Tzu puppies, each weighing less than 2 pounds, died from being sexually assaulted. The owner apparently didn't know what happened and wasn't a suspect, and the puppy rapist was never caught. Two people, a 9-year-old boy and an adult, stumbled upon a man who was holding a puppy and was using or acting like he was using his new puppy's mouth to pleasure himself. A neighbor saw a man corralling one of his sheep into the barn, bent over with his pants down, and the guy said, "You caught me trying to fuck your sheep." I've heard from people who've seen it firsthand. In the military, they go to a different country, and it's normal to see some guy on the side of the road having sex with a sheep or a goat, and that in some countries, it's like just normal. It's like just something that the boys do. And here's an article, and this was in Mamvuka. It's a goat farming area. And it was discovered that young men are having sex with goats in that village. Several young men said that they were having sex with goats to avoid AIDS. One young man considers bestiality as safe sex and said he and his friends were having sex with goats 4 times per week. "We are afraid to have intercourse with girls because every month we bury people who have died of HIV or AIDS. AIDS is transmitted by having sex with a woman. Goats cannot get AIDS. Goats cannot transmit AIDS to us, and that's why we are saying such a practice is safe," they said. There were 4 teenage boys, all of them under the age of 12. Members of the community saw the young boys on several occasions having sex with the goats at their school. The boys said it was part of playing when they had sex with goats one by one. "We went to the schoolyard in the afternoon while no one was there. 3 of us would be holding the goat while the other one would have sex. We never knew what we were doing was wrong," said the boy. Meanwhile, a senior community member said it was normal practice in all African countries for teenagers between the ages of 9 and 12 to have sex with animals like goats, donkeys, dogs, and chickens. Many boys did that in the olden days. I saw many of my friends having sex with goats, donkeys, cows, and chickens. Many of them did so because they were told a woman's vagina could kill them, so they started experimenting with animals. The youths were just warned. So, how do you even function? That's what I'm confused on. Okay, like a toy poodle or a chicken, what do you do? So I watched the show with Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond, the Grand Tour or whatever, where they go to all these different places out in the middle of nowhere. Clarkson actually, let me just read this to you. There's no easy way of saying this, so I'll just jump straight in. While driving through Colombia last year, I encountered a man who was making love to a donkey. Further investigations revealed that he was not an escaped lunatic and that a lot of the men in his village do the same thing when they're bored or lonely. Now, I know the program that I make for Amazon is supposed to be a car show, but I thought the donkey story was interesting. So we broke out the cameras and filmed one of the men making the two-backed beast with Eeyore, and then we spoke to his mates, who were at pains to point out that they only had sex with the female donkeys because doing it with a boy donkey would be weird, obviously. And then James May had a show that he also goes and travels around in these areas that there's nobody, and I can't remember what episode it is, but I swear to you, in the background, it showed it because he was shocked too. There was a kid going to have sex with, I can't remember if it was a donkey, sheep, or goat, but that's what he was doing, and everyone was watching like it was nothing. I guess that's what all the kids in the town did for practice, so it's just so weird. Here is an article from Vice that maybe explains how you have sex with a bird. Of all animals, having sex with birds is the most impractical. Firstly, they can fly, which makes them tough to woo and catch. And once you have them pinned down, they probably flap like hell anyway, shedding telltale feathers everywhere. There's also a clearly impractical size disparity. That's what I'm confused on. Whereas a cow, donkey, horse, or other usual targets for animal lust might not be too bothered by certain types of violations, but screwing a bird will probably push its brain out through its eyes. Yes, that's what I was wondering. The size, how does that work? So, despite the clear impracticability, it's an age-old practice. In the Old Testament, sex with any animal is punishable by death, but other ancient laws differentiate between species. Sex with birds was deemed less offensive. 13th century penitential codes distinguished between bestiality with a mammal and with a chicken, and avian sex carried a lower penance because fowl were less costly to replace than farm animals. However, eating the bird after making love to it was frowned upon and could land you with 2 or 3 years of fasting. The bird gets a bad deal no matter what, though. If it wasn't killed during the act, it would most likely be slaughtered because it was unfit for human consumption or even put on animal trial. Yes, animals were put on trial between the 9th and 17th centuries. There were cases of animals going to court on accusations of bestiality who would face a death sentence if found guilty, as was the fate of 2 turtle doves in the 1600s, but what they exactly did was unclear. The most famous case of bird sex involves the Greek mythological figure Leda, the mother of Troy, who was raped by Zeus in the form of a swan. Judging by the common pictorial depictions, it looked like she actually quite enjoyed it, and they had a feathery cuddle after she laid some eggs. Somehow, Leda became a bit of an iconic sex kitten in the Renaissance. It was deemed more acceptable to portray her swan-loving than paintings of human coitus. So this was as close to porn as a lot of people could get. And then, of course, the daddy of all the perverts, the Marquis de Sade, wrote about the process as practiced in one Parisian brothel where they employed a turkey. He writes, "The girl holds the bird's neck locked between her thighs. You have her ass straight ahead of you for prospect, and she cuts the bird's throat the same moment you discharge. It was commonly known in rural areas that if you penetrated a bird and wrung its neck a moment before ejaculation, the bird's sphincter constricts and spasms before death, causing allegedly pleasurable manipulations of the penis. So, examples of episotomy continue throughout history. Most amusingly was Hustler publisher Larry Flint, who admitted at the age of 9 to having sex with a chicken, which in the hollows of eastern Kentucky wasn't all that unusual. Older boys told him that a chicken was as good as a girl, so he tried it. In his autobiography, An Unseemly Man, he writes, "I caught one of my grandmother's hens out behind the barn, managed to insert my penis into its egg bag, and thrust away. When I let the chicken go, it started towards the main house, staggering, squawking, and bleeding. Fearing that my grandmother would see what had happened, I caught it, wrung its neck, and threw it in the creek." In later life, he built a 3-foot replica of the chicken that he had violated in his youth in his faux hillbilly cabin and said, "Who said I'm not sentimental?" So that answers to me how they would do birds, because I just didn't know how anatomy-wise that works. Okay, I just found the jackpot. I found a website that will answer any curiosities that I have on how it works. And so I think this episode now will get very interesting, and I will definitely completely clear my history out of this computer. So this is a How to Have Sex with a Dog, a woman's guide. I have seen a lot of women asking how they can have sex with their new lover. So I found a few tips to help them discover their new passion, and here so you don't have to search the internet. I hope this helps. So it's kind of going to be in a little bit broken English. So I'll try to fix that as I read it, but I doubt I will. Okay, oral sex. Oral sex is the way many women first get exposed to dog love. Dogs are naturally attracted to the scent of a woman's vagina, so many of you have already discovered that Rover likes to sniff your panties or even your crotch. Allowing him to take it a step further is an excellent way to experience some of the greatest oral sex you will ever have in your life. One of the nicest things about allowing a dog to lick your snatch is that most male dogs will spend much more time than a human male providing you with the most electrifying oral sex. A dog's tongue is also much longer and is able to get to many places that a man can't or won't. A dog's tongue is covered with thousands of tiny buds that when he licks your clitoris will feel sensations that you did not know existed. And how many of you have had a man give you analingus? Not many, I'll bet. Well, I'm here to tell you that having your ass licked is a great thing, and a dog has no problem doing it for you. If you have never experienced a tongue working from the very top of your slit all the way around to the end of your crack, you have truly missed something grand. There are several good positions for you to try if you want to try this. If you decide that your preference is clitoral vaginal only, I have found one position that works very well. I recommend that you sit on the edge of a bed so that the back of your calves are flat against the edge of the bed. You then lay straight back, picking your feet up and placing something on the edge of the bed. This will expose your clitoris, labia, and vagina to his waiting tongue. For those of you who would like more but want to prevent him from trying to mount you, then the ideal position is reclining on your side on pillows or cushions on the floor. All you have to do at that point is to raise your leg a little and he will have access to all of your pussy and ass. For those of you that want ultimate experience, you will have to give him full and total access to you. This can only happen when you are down on all fours. Now, I say that staying in that position for more than a few minutes is not comfortable at all, but there is one way that I have found that will be both very comfortable and very enjoying. You kneel at the edge of your bed and then lie the upper part of your body face down onto the bed, keeping your knees on the floor. Then you spread your knees apart as much as you can, giving him full access to you. One very important item to remember while you are considering what position you would like to use is that if you do not wish to have him mount you, this is not the position to use. Now that we've gone over all wonderful things that a dog can do for you with his tongue, let's talk about what you can do with yours. According to several doctors and veterinarians I have spoken with, a dog's cock is 3 times cleaner than a man's cock. A dog will spend considerable time every day cleaning it. How many men do you know that do that? So why not try it? I find that when I am sucking off a dog, I have tremendous amount of mental stimulation that gets me horny as hell. Just knowing that I am sucking on an animal's dick will get me so horny that it doesn't take much to get me off. I usually use a free hand to masturbate while I'm sucking him and have some of the greatest orgasms this way. Most dogs will gladly allow you to suck them, and there are many positions to do it in. I find that 2 positions are very good and are easy to accomplish. For those of you that are just starting out and are nervous about doing it, I recommend that you have him lie on his back with you next to him. This will give you full access to his cock and be able to control all the action. Another great method I use is to lie on my back with the back of my head slightly raised by a pillow and have him stand over me with his cock within reach of my mouth. Then he humps me and does all the work, leaving my hands free to masturbate myself. One important thing to remember when sucking a dog: while most men like to have their balls rubbed or fondled while having their cocks sucked, this is not so with all dogs. Before starting any sexual activity with him, touch and feel his cock and balls to ensure that he does like it. The next thing that we are going to do now that we have gotten into the position that we prefer is to begin to get him aroused. I find that the best way is to first gently stroke his cock through his sheath until it begins to enlarge and slip out. Once you have at least an inch of him out of his sheath, you should gently take him into your mouth. You should continue to gently stroke him with your hand while you begin to slowly move your mouth back and forth over his cock. As you continue to do this, his cock will continue to enlarge until he reaches full erection. While you are moving your mouth over his cock, you should try to place the tip of your tongue into the indentation on the head of his cock, as this will cause him to reach climax. As he gets closer to his climax, you will notice that the base of his cock there is a very large bulge known as his knot. The knot is used to hold his cock inside a female, dog, or human until he has finished ejaculating. If you are considering going further, then you should make a mental note of the size of his cock and knot. The average large dog has a cock, when aroused, that is 5 to 7 inches long and 1.5 to 2 inches wide. The knot for a dog whose cock is 6 inches long and 1.5 inches wide can be 2 inches long and 4 inches wide. A dog is different than most mammals, as from the time they begin to become aroused until they begin to get soft, they will have some sort of ejaculate coming from their cocks. At first arousal, there is a clear, thin fluid that tastes like iron and has the consistency of water. This is pre-cum that is for lubrication, so his knot will slip into the female's vagina. At full arousal is when he will actually produce his sperm, and you can tell when this happens as he comes, because he will begin to have a slightly salty taste to it. You should be aware that his cum will never be as thick as a man's, but he will produce about twice as much as a man. I personally think that the dog cum tastes much better than man cum. Vaginal sex. Good old screwing, that's what this is all about. Well, not quite. There are a number of things that differ from sex with a man other than the dog can't get you pregnant. At this point, I will assume that you have made the decision that you are going to have sexual intercourse with a large dog, which would be about 75 pounds, and that you are there by yourself. I will be your companion, and you may visualize me there. The first discussion is how we are going to do it. There are 2 prime positions to use: the old standard doggy style and the safer missionary style. If we choose the missionary position, you can prevent him from getting his knot inside you, and we can be in control the whole time. Okay, you want to try the missionary position? You are sitting on the edge of a chair, a towel under you to prevent his and your cum from staining the chair. Your ass at the very edge, legs spread wide apart. Here comes your lover. He sees your warm and wet pussy, and he begins to sniff and lick it. You call him up to you so that he has his front paws on the chair and his body between your legs. I like to put some socks over his front paws so that he doesn't scratch me accidentally. Then you take his sheath in hand and begin to stroke it gently, and as he begins to swell and extend, you guide the end of his cock into you. As he feels the wetness and warmth of you, he begins to hump, slowly at first and faster until you feel his knot at the mouth of your vagina. As his cum slowly fills you up, you too reach climax. If you allow him to put his knot inside you, you will be together until he gets soft, which is usually 15 to 20 minutes, but can take up to 45 minutes. The major benefit of the missionary position is that if you do not want to have his knot inside you, you can, in almost all cases, prevent it by holding it in your hand. I find that the most satisfying and arousing sensations I feel are caused by the knot being inside me. So she's a naughty girl. Okay, sorry, that was a bad one. I try to have my dog put his knot in me every time we make love, but whether or not you do is up to you. Doggy style is just that. You are down on all fours with him. This position will allow you to fully experience the pleasure of having a canine lover. He will at first sniff, then lick you, and after the taste and smells begin to arouse him, he will move to a position to mount you. The dog will usually come up directly behind you and mount you that way. Once he has mounted you, he will begin to hump, trying to get his cock into you. If this is something new to him, then you should guide his cock to where it should go. He will do the rest. As the two of you continue, he will move faster and faster with his strokes until you feel his knot begin to swell and rub at the lips. At this point, we have decision time. If you want it inside you, you should totally relax and allow him to slide it in. If you don't want it, you should reach back with your hand and try to hold the knot with your hand. A simple note of warning: if you use this position and then decide that you don't want his knot in you, you may not be able to prevent it from happening. If his knot is in you, you will have to wait until he gets soft. I do not recommend you trying to remove it unless your vagina is very large. It will hurt and may even injure you. So, if you have any doubts at all, I would stick with the missionary position. Well, we are now mated, and his knot continues to swell inside you. Begin to feel this warm feeling inside of you. I have been told that a dog's body temperature is higher than a human's, and that his cum is even warmer, and as he comes deep inside, you can feel the warmth. His knot is now fully expanded. His cum is flowing into you, your juices begin to flow mixing with his, and at this point you begin to feel his knot begin to throb. I found that while doing it doggy style, as his knot pushes against the inside walls of my vagina, it also pushes against the inside of my clitoris, and that the sensations of that happening drive me wild. I have reached orgasm up to 7 times in a row while this is happening. So, if you remember the David Parker Ray episode, he did build a special contraption where the girl would be on all fours so the dog could mount her and she was unable to, stop anything. Anal sex. There are some things that you should consider before you attempt allowing your lover to mount you for the purpose of anal sex. You should be experienced with anal sex. By this I mean you should have no difficulty taking your human lover's cock into you. You will not always be successful with achieving penetration, and if you do, you may wind up with his knot inside you. If you now still want to try it, well, let's go. In finding a good position for a male canine human female anal sex, I have tried dozens of positions and found many that work and many that don't. I have found the best position is one called modified doggy style. To get into that position, you should first find an open space, very private of course, inside your house or wherever, and place a soft pad on the floor for you to kneel on. You then kneel on the pad and get into a normal doggy position. To achieve the correct position, you now bring your knees forward and tuck them up into your stomach. Now that you have done that, you rest the front of your body on your elbows. Great, you have mastered getting into the proper position. Now there are some other things you have to do before you call to your lover. We have this little problem with lubrication that has to be solved with something, otherwise this will really hurt. I have found that natural oils such as olive or corn oils work best and will not hurt your lover. Never use Vaseline or that like, as they will make the dog sick or even worse. Well, now we know what lubrication we are going to use. We must now apply it. It is not enough to just smear a little oil on the outside of your anus for this to work. You must lubricate both outside as well as inside. The easy part is the outside, and I leave that until I am in position to do. To lubricate the inside, I have found that if I lubricate as much of the inside of my anus as possible, I have no discomfort at all. I use a large eyedropper that will hold about an ounce or so of oil to get the oil inside me, and when I have done that, insert one finger to spread the oil over the muscle. So as I'm reading this and my dog's snoring in the background, it's just really probably awkward to me and you. Congratulations, you are now ready. You have done your inside lubrication and are in the proper position, and here comes your lover. You should now take your oil and rub some on your anus and the area around it. After he has mounted you, you will probably have to guide him into you. Once he is inside, he will jump just like he will in vaginal sex. The same precautions concerning his knot should be used here as well. I do not recommend those just starting out to try having him insert his knot, as there is not as much stimulation with anal sex. You may want to gently masturbate while he is in you. There's one way to increase the stimulation, and that is to place a dildo into your vagina. This will transmit his movement inside you to the clitoris and help you reach climax. Just a few footnotes about the fun of canine-human sex. You can do all these things while the human lover, male or female, is present, and in some cases the experience is more enjoyable. As I said, these are just a few tips I have found I wanted to share with the community. I know some have been doing this for a while, but there are those just starting and discovering this passion, so this person wanted to share. Well, that answers the question about dogs, so let's see what else we can find. Okay, and here on this site, boar sex tips. First, you should know that breeding a boar, one that is used all the time for sows, is not for you. They become very aggressive and can easily injure you. You really should think about one of the smaller breeds that normally doesn't go over 250 pounds or so. You should get a male piglet and hand raise it so that it is your pet pig. Pigs are smarter than dogs and train easily since they are extremely food-oriented. Second, you really need to enjoy contact in your cervix and large amounts of thick semen. A pig's penis is designed to get into the cervix. As he fucks, the curly tip turns inside the vagina seeking the cervix. The tip is very slender and made to slide into the cervix. Once the cervical entrance is found, the pig's curly tip will lock into your cervix and the pig's fucking will slow down. Third, you should enjoy a big load. After he locks into your cervix, he will begin to cum a lot. Some pigs can pump out almost 2 cups of cum. At first, the semen is clear and somewhat thin, then a thicker, milky semen that has most of the sperm, and then a lot more comes. Lastly, some very thick semen like jelly is slowly pumped inside of you. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to come. The whole time his tip is in your cervix. Every time he squirts, his tip will flex and massage your cervix. The shaft is so narrow, so it was mostly the tip in your cervix that does the sexy stuff. Plus, being filled really full of thick cum. That thick cum can stay in you for days, so you should be ready for that. It can slide out much later without much warning. Having a special pig that is kept away from other farm animals and is kept in very clean conditions is a real good idea. Pigs like to be clean if given the chance. Oh, good. Here's a glossary of the wild, so we can learn these terms that they use. Candidate is what we call playmates on previous networks. Chite is hypothetically a delicious Whopper competitor, a cheeseburger bite. Chite, aka a delicious, nutritious item otherwise packed in a wrapping dipped in feces. Ew. Dildogging, when using the dog cock as a dildo rather than natural action where the male is in control. Dodger, a male in an animal sex movie that avoids being penetrated by the dog. Dog slave, a wild who has made a formal commitment to dedicating their body to the pleasure of dogs under the guidance of a suitable master or mistress. Fence jumper, someone who has sex with other people's animals without their knowledge or consent. Flow, the volume of animal semen ejaculated into a woman's vagina over a given period. IKEA, slang for interface kit. Interface kit is equipment needed to handle the physical differences in species and styles. K9SM, canine slavery and master, the wild equivalent of BDSM. Knot, the expanding ball-like part of the male dog penis designed to lock the penis inside the vagina during intercourse and prevent it from coming out, thus improving the chances of maximum semen injection. Knotted is a situation where the male dog's penis is locked into the vagina. Love scratch, the claw marks often experienced during intercourse with an animal. Missionary, an advanced sexual position where the female lay on her back, taking the dog between her legs instead of the usual doggy-style position. Mount, the action of an animal climbing atop a mate just prior to intercourse. Mojo, nickname for the dog penis. Natural action, intercourse where the male performs naturally, mounting and thrusting, and is in control. Nectar, is dog ejaculate, liquid emitted while the male is erect, which is the seminal fluid and or precum. The os, or os, is the bone inside the dog's penis. Owner is someone with suitable pets to play with, typically seeking playmates for adventures. Pet pussy is animal-friendly vagina, the finest pussy in the world. Pet skills, the methods and techniques and level of capability demonstrated by a pet girl. Playmate, someone interested in meeting with owners to enjoy sexual experiences with pets. Rain, word used to describe the shower-like spray of a dog during ejaculation. Sheath, the protective cover of a male animal's penis, the kind of animal equivalent to a foreskin. Sheep. Straights, little lambs who get nervous when surrounded by well-meaning wolves, often lashing out in their own charming way. Snowflake, someone turning to pet love in order to be extra special, instead of just being wonderfully special like the rest of us. Switch, the moment a vagina accepts her first animal penis and becomes a pet pussy. Also used to describe someone who is variably dominant or submissive. Undershot, the difficult camera angle used to capture the action of a dog penetrating a woman or man. The guilt, the often challenging mental changes that occur when a wild first begins to accept their interest in animal sex, usually passing quite quickly. Tie, shallow tie, when the knot swells just inside the mouth of the vagina and usually slips out quite frequently. Deep tie, when the knot swells behind the pelvic floor muscles of the vagina, forming a tight, stable lock that is not so easily uncoupled. Turned tie, when the male has knotted the female and turned ass to ass, an advanced technique. Wild, a person active in or with an active interest in animal sex. Zoophile is a derogatory term to describe a wild, based upon the numerous paraphilia of Krafft Ebing, suggesting that most all atypical sexual interests are a sickness of mind. I guess here is another article. After my husband left me with a young kid, I was on my own for a while. Then one day my friend, who is also blonde like me, offered to take me out for an evening. We finished the evening in a West Indian drinking club where she was a regular. I woke up the next morning to find two big black guys working over me. Apparently they had been at me all night, and it was the best sex I have ever had. After that, I went down there as often as I could, and I always ended up entertaining a couple of black guys. After a while, someone suggested that I did a live show with my friend on a table in front of all the customers. I've never had lesbian sex before, so I just lay there while she used her tongue and fingers and some objects on me. Then a couple of black guys came and joined in. It wasn't long before I was regularly performing live with men and women, and then one day someone brought a black Labrador in. Someone said that it was experienced with white women, and they suggested that it tried me. They got my clothes off and got me on my knees and aroused me while someone else aroused the dog and then got the dog to rape me. I'd never felt anything like it. If I thought that sex with the black guys was good, this was 10 times better, and I orgasmed within minutes. The dog did too, and it was wild, like I have never, ever experienced. My friend cleaned me out afterwards and fed me, and I was very popular with the guys after that evening. Since then, the dog and I have entertained the members on several occasions, and now they are talking about other animals for me, and I can't wait. Guys, this is just like the mother load, I'm telling you. I wish I never clicked on this link. I wish I didn't do this episode. Okay, so I'm done. I do not care anymore. I don't want to know how they do it. I don't want to know anything else. I'm just going to tell you a shortened version of 2 stories that I was going to keep longer, but now I just want to get this show over with and pretend it never happened. Okay, so let me tell you these 3 stories. I found short articles on them. I'll just read them. So this one is a woman who reveals that she had sex with a dolphin during the 1960s NASA experiment. Margaret Howe Lovett was stationed on the U.S. Virgin Islands as part of a NASA experiment to teach the intelligent mammals how to communicate. They're referring to the dolphins. She revealed that it was 1963 when a house was flooded to turn it into a dolphinarium, allowing the researchers to study the animals at close quarters. One of them, nicknamed Peter, was a sexually maturing adolescent. Peter liked to be with me. He would rub himself on my knee, my foot, or my hand, and I allowed that, she said. I wasn't uncomfortable as long as it wasn't too rough. It was just easier to incorporate that and let it happen. It was very precious and very gentle. Peter was right there. He knew that I was right there. Lovett claims the sex play became a regular part of her studies, adding it would just become part of what was going on, like an itch. Just get rid of that scratch and we would be done and move on. The nature of their relationship caused a scandal, and rumors grew about experiments of dolphins suffering drug abuse with LSD tests. So there's also, I guess, a BBC documentary on her called The Girl Who Talked to Dolphins. Some studies have shown evidence that male dolphins are drawn to women because they give off similar pheromones to female dolphins. Malcolm, Brenner, and Dolly met in 1970 when the new College of Florida student was on his first freelance photography assignment. He was supposed to take pictures for a book about Sarasota's Florida land, but instead he was sidetracked by Dolly, who was a dolphin. Dolly swam to the other side of the tank when the unfamiliar human with horn-rimmed glasses and shoulder-length curls first jumped in. She eventually came around, says Brenner, who photographed the dolphin for 9 months. Once, as he was rubbing her back, Dolly flipped over to present her genital slit. Later, she started rubbing her teeth on the photographer's arm in what he describes as an erotic way. When he wouldn't give her what she wanted, Dolly would retaliate by pushing him 12 feet underwater. Female dolphins are very assertive about their sexuality, Brenner said. They don't have any inhibitions about expressing it, whereas other animals are passive or at least just receptive. In his telling, Brenner has always been attracted to animals. As a child, he says he was molested by his psychologist. Around the same time, his dad took him to see a Disney film called The Shaggy Dog. He got an erection even though he was only 5, which he now calls a defining moment of his life. His zoophilia started in earnest a few years later when he was 11 or 12. Brenner had sex with the family poodle, although he says he felt dirty afterward. But it was his second and final encounter with an animal, the one that took place with Dolly at Florida Land, that ended up making Brenner the unofficial spokesperson for the people who think animals can consent to sex. And he told his story to filmmakers. It's a short film called Dolphin Lover. Although Brenner had written a fictional version of his and Dolly's relationship in 2009, he'd never openly talked about how exactly he did the deed. According to his account in the documentary, Dolly was alone in the pool with another male dolphin, but voluntarily came to a different area to have privacy with her suitor. After about 30 minutes of foreplay, Brenner penetrated the animal's vaginal cavity, which he described as a series of complicated valves. It was a difficult act to perform. He had to position himself vertically while the dolphin was horizontal. But Brenner describes the experience as both gentle and erotic. I felt this intense verging with her on every level, he says in the documentary. It's really like we stopped being two individual creatures and became one creature that became one with itself. He claims both he and the dolphin came. After their encounter, Brenner moved to Olympia, Washington, and Dolly was shipped off to a different park in Mississippi. He was informed later that she committed suicide, and to this day, Brenner thinks it's because he abandoned her. Now to the Enumclaw horse sex case. Kenneth Pinion had worked for Boeing for 8 years. He had been previously married to a woman and had children with her. He had moved from Seattle to Oak Harbor, Washington. Pinion had been building a new house and a barn in which he planned to keep a horse along the Key Peninsula Highway in Gig Harbor, Washington. He was about to begin making payments on his 30-year, $144,000 mortgage on it. Pinion had previously lost the ability to experience certain sensations after suffering from a motorcycle accident, and he had become involved in increasingly extreme sexual acts, such as insertion of extremely large dildos, fisting, and receptive anal sex with horses. In the early 2000s, he found a group of men online, nicknamed Zoos, who began meeting at a farm in an unincorporated area in King County, Washington, for communal weekends. They filmed and later posted online each other being sodomized by horses, along with sometimes having sex with each other afterwards. There is a documentary on it called Zoo that was made in 2007, and according to the co-writer, the men trained the horses to penetrate them by stripping, applying a horse breeding pheromone, and bending over. In 2015, he wrote that the men had a sexual fixation on large penises that may have had nothing to do with horses, and he also believed that Pinion did not truly love horses and was not a true zoophile, although Pinion had a cast created of the penis of his favorite horse, Strut. The incident that killed Pinion occurred at a 40-acre farm located in King County, Washington, 5 miles northwest of the city of Enumclaw. Sergeant John Urquhart of the sheriff's office says that typically men were having sex with a horse on James Michael Tate's property, but on this particular night, it is my understanding that horse wasn't particularly receptive, so Pinion Tate and a third unidentified man snuck onto the southeast 444th Street Farms barn that night. The men would often visit that farm for sexual purposes. Either Pinion or the unidentified man recorded Tate being anally penetrated by a stallion known as Big Dick. After finishing, Tate then filmed Pinion being anally penetrated by Big Dick. During this incident, Pinion sustained internal injuries, including a perforated colon. Pinion was anonymously dropped off at the Enumclaw Community Hospital on July 2, 2005. A man asked hospital staff for medical assistance for his companion. Pinion was found dead in the emergency room, aged 45. The man who brought Pinion into the hospital had disappeared by the time hospital staff came to contact him. According to the medical examiner's office, Pinion died of acute peritonitis due to perforation of the colon, and the death was ruled accidental. In other words, he was penetrated by a huge horse penis, and it tore up his colon. After Pinion died, the authorities used his driver's license to find acquaintances and relatives. Earlier news reports stated that the authorities had used surveillance camera footage to track down Pinion's companion. Using the contacts, the authorities found the farm where the incident occurred. The police tracked down the rural Enumclaw area farm, which was known in zoophile internet chat rooms as a destination for people who wanted to have sex with livestock, and seized 100 VHS videos and DVDs amounting to hundreds of hours of videotapes of men engaging in bestiality. One of the videotapes featured Kenneth Pinion shortly before he died on July 2nd. Prosecutors later determined that the horse had not been injured. It was only after Pinion died, when the law enforcement looked for one way to punish his associates, that the legality of bestiality in Washington state became an issue. The prosecutor's office wanted to charge Tate with animal abuse, but the police found no evidence of abused animals on the many videotapes they collected from his home, as there was no law against humanely fucking a horse. The prosecutors could only charge Tate with trespassing. Jennifer Sullivan, a Seattle Times staff reporter, said the original King County Sheriff's Department did not expect the newspaper to report on the event because it was too gruesome. After an Associated Press report stated that the farm where the event occurred attracted a significant number of people who wanted to partake in bestiality, the Seattle Times decided that it needed to write articles about the case since multiple people were involved. Supposedly there is a video circulating called either Mr. Hands or Two Guys, One Horse that shows what happened. So yeah, I'm done. I'm completely done with that episode. I'm sorry for even considering doing that episode. I hope I have not made anyone interested in bestiality at all. And I don't even... Look, I just saw some things that I wish I did not see, and I will never be the same again. And I just wanted to let you guys know that I probably was telling you that story about the woman and her dog and all that stuff with the words. I usually don't talk like that, and I was trying to be quiet because God forbid my kids hear me talk about sex with a dog, even though they hear me talk about killing people all the time. So I had to say it quietly, but I don't want you guys to think I normally talk like that, because I don't. I cuss and say what people say in the articles. And I don't really ever cuss, except I like to type the F word because to me it really puts a lot of emphasis on what I'm trying to say.